Hello and welcome back once again to the Single Malt Review. Thanks as always for joining us. I am Tim and this is Dave. And this, what is this?
It is more Woodford Reserve. We had a very good experience recently with Woodford Reserve's straight Kentucky rye whiskey.
We went back to the well. God, imagine if you had an actual well with bourbon in it. Hell of a thing.
This here is Woodford Reserve's double oaked offering. It is Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey finished in a second oak barrel.
So, very, very similar, sort of, similar in theory at least, if not in the exact process, to the Maker's Mark 46, which we tried not too long ago, and really, really enjoyed. I was quite pleased with that one.
Yeah.
So, sort of caused me to seek out this, which is very much Woodford Reserve's attempt at the same thing. Only they've gone even further. They have, instead of posting toasted staves into the barrel, a wee bit more, like Maker's Mark have, they have completely racked mature Woodford Reserve bourbon into completely different barrels.
Yeah, totally in fresh casks, apparently heavily toasted but lightly charred.
And given how bourbon works in a regulatory capacity, those casks that they've used just to finish the whiskey can't be used again to make bourbon. So they've burnt 2 barrels to make one batch of whiskey, which seems like wildly wasteful practice. But this is not particularly expensive. So my theory, my conspiracy here is that they've probably got a pretty big contract with a very large Scotch whiskey distiller who can use and will immediately buy up any and all used barrels they've got. And so they're not really costing themselves that much money there, because if these were just piling up out back, it would seem horribly wasteful just to completely burn up a barrel simply to finish one's whiskey. But can't complain about the price, which is barely more than standard Woodford. And importantly, as I will mention forever, this one we get the proper strength, 43.2 in this case. There is no silly watered down Australasian version just for us.
Staggeringly high by bourbon standards, but definitely well above the 40% bare minimum mark. But
so,
first off,
what we'll expect from this? Well, what would you expect from something that's been in a cask twice?
Well, expect the fresh cask would add a lot of very sappy, fresh woodiness to it, possibly a lot of extra caramel. If I say it's been heavily toasted, not especially charred, that will ease up on some of the smoky, woody characters. Maybe there'll be less vanilla coming through. I'll be keen to see how it turns out.
I'm not sure about less vanilla. I would expect all the oak characteristics up the wazoo on this one, just sort of doubled down on. So there's, and it's pretty immediate, there's that maple syrup, which is always present in Woodford Reserve whiskies. I even found it in the rye whiskey we just tasted, but it's just on steroids with this one. It is such a soupy, saucy, sweet bourbon.
But not as vanilla-y as a bourbon might be, so it's definitely sweet. I was just actually at first caught off guard by the colour. That is such a rich brown. It is really hazelnutty. It looks gorgeous. It is
pretty
a really nice looking
dark,
beverage
which,
there.
Kind of makes sense when you consider where it's been. It's had not twice the wood contact in terms of age, but twice the wood contact in terms of the fresh oak that's been pumped into this. So, just huge amounts of kind of everything but the spirit.
Mapley as heck, not nearly as vanilla-y as a strong bourbon might otherwise be. In fact, what's reminding me of overwhelmingly is a few years ago, my wife, just as a novelty gift, got me a bunch of these American imported maple and bacon flavoured lollipops. And I don't know why those are springing to mind, but just the aroma is so close.
Well, it's got the maple. I'd be hesitant to say I could smell bacon.
There was vanishingly small amounts of bacon aroma in these lollipops. I'll put it that to them. They're very much being maple more than anything else. But
an amazingly American thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, also in here, there's the spice there's not sort of as much ×2 spice as I would have expected, but then again, that coming through from as much from the spirit as from the wood. That's not necessarily been amplified to quite the same extent. And
it's just sweet and syrupy first and foremost.
Yeah,
but not
just hugely sort of. Even the nose smells kind of thick. There's a viscosity even to the smell of it. It's such a sort of concentrated and soupy thing. And on the palate,
wow, that is a big, big prickly flavour. It is explosively expansive. It just erupts and fills your mouth with vapours and spices and
It's a huge flavour. The spirit, even though it's not the strongest bourbon in the world,
it comes through strongly.
It's pretty explosively vibrant once it hits the tongue. But the overriding thing is just that lake of oak that comes with it. There is just so much.
It's light on the vanilla, but it is big on sweet, woody maple syrup characters. It is sappy and resinous, both from the texture and the flavour.
The char is enormous. It's almost like kind of sucking on a burned log.
Really
it's
sort of
super charry.
Caramelised. It's.
I think the amount of char, and this would be in the first barrel if they were toasted rather than charred secondary barrels that they went in, is critical, absolutely critical to this whiskey. Was there not this char edge which both dries and, well, mostly dries and gives a slightly better, more kindling edge to the whiskey, this would be cloyingly sweet. It would be undrinkably sweet. It would be tip it on your ice cream sundae sweet, and it would not be a good sipping bourbon. This is a good sipping bourbon because of these drier, charier elements within the set of flavours.
Yeah.
That said, though, it's barely offsetting. It's sort of barely holding the door closed to these hugely sweet, massive maple syrup characters.
I think I'm going to attribute that to the second casks, which I think have got very caramelised on account of being less charred. There's a good that toastiness has brought out the caramelised characters. It's astonishingly sweet. It's just a little bit of spice, bit of black pepper and some ginger just to help balance things out. Plus, as you say, the slightly bitter charring from the first casks.
It puts me very much in mind of a toasted marshmallow.
Oh.
Mind you, I don't eat a lot of toasted marshmallows, but it's a fairly singular experience because unless you're a fan of toasting them over a fan heater or something, I don't know what people get up to, but assuming you're doing it classically around a bonfire, then that element of sort of smoky, fiery wood is always there, kind of part of the whole deal.
Yeah,
and
the initial layer of sort of crisp, or slightly burnt characters, but that quickly you break through that, and then it's a creamy, sweet, warm, mouth-filling, sort of viscous
that
sweetness.
Charry, almost burnt aftertaste of a really crackly, crispy toasted marshmallow. The one that kind of hangs around once the sweetness has dissipated. That is extremely real in here as well. It's a bourbon that I think could be polarising. It's riding the same dangerous line that the Maker's 46 did, and for exactly the same reason. It's going to be a bourbon that some classical bourbon drinkers, and they're not wrong in their case, will say, this is way too sweet. This is too sweet. I can't do anything with this because it's going to overpower cocktails and make them taste like I've put, actual maple syrup in them. And there's too much going on to sip on. I don't think there is, but I kind of approach bourbon quite equally, though we both have our particular tastes in Scotch whisky, which is something we're much more familiar with. I think we both approach bourbon fairly equally in terms of I don't really have a favourite kind. I don't seek out one thing or the other. I'm still really forming my complete taste profile and opinion of all the different bourbons there are, because there are a lot and we have done far from taste them all. So this one, I think, is approachable, but was it any sweeter? Was there a drop more maple syrup in here? I think disasters could occur. So as long as I think they're careful with their mix, they're probably onto a pretty good thing here, because I do enjoy it. I don't think it's quite as good as the Maker's Mark. I think the Maker's Mark had a certain... I think they're sort of the more neutral, the sort of cleaner, clearer, wheaty-based spirit that Maker's Mark produces was slightly more of a better candidate, I should say, to that sort of treatment. Woodford Reserve is a sweet bourbon to begin with, so any process that makes it sweeter, you're in the danger zone immediately.
Yeah, they've skirted pretty close here, and the sweetness of this combined with the sticky, almost tacky body that it's got, it really does feel like you're drinking glue or something, just how much it gums up your mouth and fills it with sugars.
So I can say that, one, I like it, two, they are seriously playing with fire. Even if this varied batch to batch, even I could find it too sweet. And bourbon purists sitting down there in Kentucky watching the races or whatever, probably right out. Probably think it was just way too sweet, candy bourbon, children's bourbon, whatever. Smuggle it to the high school prom or whatever you do in America. Not traditional at all and no good. And if you think that, then give us your opinion in the comments, please. Because, as I say, we're not bourbon experts over here. And I would like to know more about the sort of, bourbon perspectives that are out there. But yeah, I like this. I just don't like it as much as, in this case, the maker's version. So this one is an 86 for me. It's fine, but it could be better. What do you think?
Well, I like it, as I've hopefully made clear already. It delivers a quite uniquely powerful, punchy, and explosive set of flavours. It's very heavily at the extremely sweet end of the spectrum, with minimal counterbalancing on the other end of a flavour seesaw. It says a lot in a very short space of time once you take a sip of this. On the other hand, though, it is almost alarmingly sweet. Combined with that rich, cloying body means it's almost too syrupy for its own good. So it's definitely worth a sample because of just how expressive it is. And I'd rate it an 87.
There you go. Fairly tight band there. So whether you like it or not, I think is really going to be down to personal taste. It is going to be quite too sweet for many, but if you're, say, super duper into Glendronach whiskey, for instance, I think that might be right up your alley because it's coming from a similar direction, I think.
Yeah, I'm quite a Glendronach fan, but this is leaps and bounds ahead on the sweetness and the stickiness.
Yeah, it really is. All right, well, we will come from a different direction as we finally got rid of all these bourbons, and it's back to almost in Scotland. It's not. We're back to India next time, so catch us then. Slanger.